Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to Wendover Productions and the video is a week in the life of a US president. Now, I mean, this is going to be one stressful job. That is obvious. That's obvious. I mean, we all know that. But I've had questions before, like silly things like, does the president actually live in the White House or these things and that? And I'm sure this will answer it to a degree. And I don't know how accurate this will actually be because I do like this channel. I've reacted to this channel before and it is one of the channels that I enjoy watching. But is this actually how it is, or is this just based off just assumptions and things that they've seen on, I don't know, sites online, websites online, just that sort of stuff? I don't know, but we're going to check this out. Hopefully going to enjoy. And yeah, a week in the life of a US president. I'm just going to assume it's just full of just non-stop chaos. So it must be a very stressful job, but at the same time, a pretty luxurious job as well. But yeah, we're going to check this out. Hopefully going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some more of my reactions that I've posted over the past few years. And yeah, you can find it through the links in the description. But let's jump into this and see what it is like for a US president daily or weekly.
7 a.m. The alarm rings, the president wakes, and the shades pull back to reveal an unseasonably warm Monday morning in Washington, D.C. First up is a walk across the hall to the dining room, where breakfast is served by a team led by longtime executive chef Christeta Comerford. Also provided are reading materials, a packet known as the Bulletin, which staffers curate to include the news that, these days, Joe Biden wants to read, both as the president and as the person. In addition to the biggest national and international stories, it's known to disproportionately include those from his home state of Delaware. But minutes later, the president walks upstairs to the White House's rarely pictured third floor. Nestled on its northeast corner is a small workout room where he starts his days by working out with trainer Drew Contreras, one of the many returnees from the Obama administration.
What? I mean, I didn't even clock it would be like that. Joe Biden still working out at, what, 8 years of age?
Quick shower, quick change, and it's 9 a.m. Time for the commute downstairs and across the West Colonnade to the fabled Oval Office. $755,580,000 is dedicated to running the presidency in 2023.
Bruh.
Even excluding attributable costs borne by other areas of government, and despite sitting at its lowest in years, this figure translates to $2,070,079 a day, $86,254 an hour, or $3,593 per minute, meaning spread out evenly, before the president even arrives for work, the American taxpayer has paid $750,000 for the job that day.
Oh,
An eye-popping sum, but one that could be worth it depending on what happens with the rest of the day. The most crucial role of the president is as the go-to when big decisions need to happen quickly. Therefore, they have to be informed on just about anything that could boil over and reach their desk. That's why almost every day starts with the most important regular meeting, the daily briefing. On this Monday, the 13th of February 2023, that starts exactly at 9 a.m., and considering she might need to stand in for Biden at moment's notice, Vice President Kamala Harris was also included, having made the far longer commute down from her residence at the Naval Observatory. The central document of these meetings is prepared by the major American intelligence agencies, summarizing what they think the president should know, and so it's been described as the, quote, most highly sensitized classified document in the government. Clearly then, there is zero chance the public can legally view any from any time recently, but the CIA did declassify some, the most recent of which from January 20th, 1977, the final day of the Ford administration. It starts with a summary of protests against rising food prices in Egypt and the dramatic effect it was having on President Anwar Sadat's popularity. This intelligence proved accurate. He was assassinated 4 years later. Next is coverage of stalling peace talks on Cyprus, a still classified section about West Germany and France, news about an upcoming trip by Soviet leader Podgorny to India, stalled price negotiations within OPEC, a trip cut short by Yugoslavia's president, and finally a status update on tensions in Benin.
They got all the information coming to them.
The report's short, the
which does make sense, obviously.
point's brief, but that's the point. The president's supposed to be the generalist, not the specialist. Next, Biden meets with his brand new chief of staff, Jeff Zients. This role is tough to define because it's so all-encompassing, but at the simplest level, the chief of staff is essentially the manager of the White House. They deal with coordinating all the operations of the president and their office, even extending to developing policy, and therefore it tends to be one of the most powerful positions in perhaps the most powerful nation on earth, and yet its holder is rarely well known outside Washington. But quickly, a minor crisis. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy tweets that he's lost confidence in architect of the Capitol Brett Blanton. This is an even less known position leading the agency that runs the Capitol complex, therefore responsible for some 2,500 employees and an $800 million annual budget. But Blanton was facing mounting pressure as a recent Inspector General report highlighted a series of missteps. He had accrued 19,000 miles or 30,000 kilometers of prohibited personal use on his government-issued vehicle, even driving it to Florida on vacation, costing the taxpayer an estimated $12,500 in additional wear and tear. He also outfitted the vehicle with lights and sirens, misrepresenting himself as a law enforcement officer, invited friends in for so-called Patriot tours while the Capitol was closed to visitors early in the pandemic, and allegedly did not even show up to work on January 6, 2021, as the building he oversaw was invaded by a mob of election-denying rioters. McCarthy was the most powerful voice asking for Blanton's removal yet, and having done so in such a public manner, it was time for Biden to act. Now, we don't know the exact details of how this particular decision was made because the minute-by-minute details of a president's day, at least within the White House, are not a matter of public record. We get what's called the public schedule, but that only includes what the White House wants us to know about, usually events open to the public or press. Mondays include few of those. They tend to be fairly boring. Nobody really schedules events on the first day of the work week, so no matter the administration, archives of public schedules indicate that, unless traveling, Mondays overwhelmingly focus on the kind of internal policy and planning work that we, the public, don't get to know the details of. At least not for a while. You see, the White House Office of Appointments and Scheduling does keep track, and like most non-classified government documents, eventually the public can get access through the rights granted by the Freedom of Information Act. Still, there's a FOIA exemption restricting access to presidential records for 5 years, then there are months or years of processing time on top of this, so the most recent minute-by-minute understanding we have of a president's day dates back to the Bush administration. On a similar boring Monday in February, Bush, a notoriously early riser, arrived at the Oval Office by 6:58 and immediately jumped into a series of meetings with his inner circle before his 8 a.m. daily briefing. After was another quick huddle before loading onto Marine One for a quick flight over the river to Mount Vernon for a ceremony commemorating the 275th birthday of George Washington.
And it's 10 o'clock at this point. God damn, a lot happens.
And then the president was back in the Oval Office just 75 minutes after stepping out.
What the
The rest of the day was a continued cascade of calls and conversations, the most exciting of which a 90-minute conference with the Prime Minister of Australia, potentially in relation to the day's announcement that the country would send additional troops to Iraq. Finally, the Monday wrapped with a small event. A screening of the movie Amazing Grace to commemorate Black History Month, before the president finished with dinner in the diplomatic reception room at 6:37 p.m. February 13th, 2023 likely looked rather similar for Biden. Just a succession of short, unscheduled meetings with key administration officials, largely in preparation for the rest of the week, with the exception of making a decision on what to do with the architect of the Capitol. That clearly happens quickly because by 3 p.m., it's announced. Biden fires Blanton.
Dang.
Finally, the last task the public knows about is a 4:30 call to Colonel Paris D. Davis, informing him that, after decades of waiting, he would be awarded the Medal of Honor for heroism in the Vietnam War. As usual, the president returned to his residence by 7 p.m., finishing the day with dinner and a read of a collection of 10 letters his staff selected out of the countless more sent to him by the general public. An unexceptional finish to an unexceptional Monday.
Sounds pretty boring. I always just, I mean, again, I don't know how legit this really is because I don't know where they're getting this stuff from, but I would have just assumed it's just, you're just like a sort, you're just there, you're like a figure who's just sort of representing whatever is being said, but then other people are doing things for you. I'm assuming there's a lot more breaks in between, like you got naps, you got, like, I'm assuming Biden is napping throughout the day multiple times. Because that's just the sort of person he is. But yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I guess it's just a general idea of what they would do. It's not specifically what they actually do. It's just an idea of what they would get up to in a week, which is, it does make sense.
The rest of the week, however, would lead up to perhaps the most exceptional day of his presidency. Tuesday, slightly busier. It begins with a daily briefing and a call to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to celebrate the day's announcement that flag carrier Air India would purchase over 200 American-made Boeing aircraft. Elsewhere in the West Wing, press slowly amble in. The White House originally told them to arrive at 7 a.m., but in the early hours of the morning, their call time was pushed to 9:30. While we can only speculate, perhaps the administration wanted them on hand when the month's inflation report released at 8:30, but then decided it unnecessary after a tip-off that the numbers would prove rather negative for the president. Inflation wasn't slowing as fast as they'd hoped, so there was no reason to amplify the news with a surprise presidential statement, for example. But there was still plenty for the press that day, and considering the demand for access to one of the most powerful people on Earth, there's quite a system to manage newsmaking at the White House. 3 main areas are dedicated to the press: the briefing room, the press corps offices behind, and the so-called Pebble Beach. This is a section of the North Lawn where about 24 television networks have a near permanent setup for live shots. If you've seen a report from the building, it was probably filmed here as the White House essentially requires it, no longer allowing crews to trample the lawn as they did in decades before. Now, these journalists are collectively represented by the White House Correspondents Association. While they have no codified rights, by tradition and in recognition of their power in shaping the public image of a president, the White House awards the association the role of managing press access to the facility. But considering there are thousands of association members, decisions need to be made as to who gets access to what based on the practical limitations of space and time. For example, it would be entirely impractical for the entire press corps to travel with the president at all times, but some of the press needs to be with the president at all times. If not, we would not have as confident an understanding about how unexpected events like 9/11 or the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan played out from Bush or Reagan's perspectives. So each day, top association members take turns to compose a smaller 13-person press pool, typically composed of a collection of a few wire reporters and photographers, a TV correspondent and crew, a radio reporter, and a print journalist. The wire reporters and photographers provide content for their subscribers, which, in the case of AP and Reuters, is essentially every news organization, while the print journalist is tasked with writing pool reports for the day, which instantly go out to a massive email list. Tuesday's designated pool reporter was Shirish Date from the Huffington Post, who first informed everyone that the pool was in their vans at 12:26, waiting to roll out in their motorcade with the president. Waits in vans are a constant for the press pool, as motorcades assemble long before a president is ready to depart, and today's totaled almost an hour, as the next report indicated the president walked into his limo at 1:21 p.m. With the knowledge of their departure, anyone at the destination knows to get ready if they want to film the motorcade's arrival. Further reports circulate who's riding with the president, who he took photos with, and then a 2-minute warning informing recipients to get ready for Biden's remarks, be it a reporter watching back at the White House briefing room or a TV director waiting to cut to a live shot of the speech. Essentially, the moment the speech ends, another report goes out summarizing it, including one of the most crucial elements: color. The rest of the press corps can watch the speech from the White House or online, getting an idea of its content, but it's tougher to interpret more subjective things like audience reaction. That's why reports often include notes on this, like the strong response to Biden's remarks against assault rifles and high-volume magazines. The Corps even gets information on Biden's outfits, like this note that he was wearing his trademark aviator sunglasses stepping out of his limo upon return to the White House.
What the fuck?
But quickly, the travel pool scrambles to the West Wing as the day's briefing is about to start. Now, given the question and answer format, where reporters sit matters. The further forward, the more likely they'll get called on. The front seats also give a better shot talking to the broadcast cameras at the back. Even just getting a seat at all is a big deal in that it guarantees access to the room even on the busiest days and bestows the right to use the offices to the rear. That's why the Correspondents Association has to decide who most deserves one, and therefore the seating chart essentially acts as a year-by-year ranking of the prominence of various media organizations.
So the bigger the media production crew, I guess, the closer you'll be to the front, I'm assuming.
In 2008, city papers like the LA Times, Chicago Tribune, and Houston Chronicle took up seats in the rear. As the economics of print grew more challenging, and therefore budgets increasingly excluded a White House correspondent, these seats started to get filled by digital outlets like the Daily Beast or BuzzFeed. Today's chart includes more outlets than ever as publications have begun the practice of splitting seats, allowing them to trade off days. But the prime seats in the first and second rows have stayed consistent through the years, still fully dedicated to legacy media organizations like CBS, the AP, ABC, and NPR. Shortly after the briefing concludes, the pool reporter calls a lid, essentially communicating that the White House has no more planned public appearances by the president or their representatives that day, and therefore that reporters can head to the office or home without worry. Wednesday was more of the same. Internal work, a trip to Maryland for a speech on the economy, then an early 3:50 p.m. lid. Thursday, a little more. At 9 a.m., the president boards Marine One for a short 13-minute flight to Maryland's Walter Reed Medical Center for his annual physical. According to a letter released later that day, Biden was recovering well from his COVID infection in 2022, had occasional issues with gastroesophageal reflux, exhibited a notably stiffened gait compared to before his foot fracture in 2020, and had a few other minor issues, but in all was a, quote, healthy, vigorous 80-year-old male who is fit to successfully execute the duties of the presidency. The president returns to the White House at 12:26, and quickly after, a pool report goes out informing the press that finally, after days of pressure, he would address the spate of recent shootdowns of unidentified aerial objects above the US. Once that was done, at 5:15, the president delivers remarks to open a screening of the movie Till in the White House's theater in commemoration
There's a theater in the White House. What?
of Black History Month, and with that, a lid was called at 5:30, finishing a relatively busy day leading up to an incredibly busy weekend. By Friday, February 17th, the week was winding down. Without any public availability on the docket for the day, any news coming from the president's office came in the form of press releases. Then, at 3:18 in the afternoon, a press lid. Oddly though, for a light day and a weekend without work travel, the Bidens decide to stay in DC rather than making their regular weekend retreat to Delaware.
Oh, so they can, every weekend they can go and stay somewhere else.
Bidens decide to stay in DC rather than making their regular weekend retreat to Delaware. In retrospect though, we know it was due to a quiet meeting held sometime during the day where advisors and Biden decided to add an unannounced, perilous stop to his scheduled trip. Despite an impending departure, the Bidens made the most of their Saturday in the city. The two attend Mass at Georgetown, then take in the National Museum of American History. Closing the night, they head to dinner at the Red Hen, a trendy restaurant in a trendy area, but the image effect they might have hoped for was overshadowed by the internet debate they set off by both ordering the same dish.
Fucking hell, what is this world, man? But with these, when they go to like these restaurants, right, I'm assuming they have someone tasting it before, a food taster or whatever it's called. Because I mean, going to a restaurant, I'm assuming there are worries that something could go wrong with the food. I don't know, someone's gonna poison you or something. But I guess do you have to walk if you're the president? Will you have to walk around with the food? I guess you have to walk around with a huge entourage and a huge security force and all that stuff. So I guess when, say, the president eats out, will they book out the whole restaurant so only they will be in the restaurant at that time? I assume that's probably how it is, right?
By 8 p.m., they're back at the White House. For the president, though, the night had just begun.
Oh? Is he having a fun little night this weekend?
It's 3:30 a.m. Without any notice or fanfare, a motorcade quietly rolls out of the White House, turning what had been a rather standard week into a truly unprecedented one. Normally, when the president heads to Joint Base Andrews to board Air Force One, they do so by helicopter. It's safer, it's quicker, and it's less disruptive to motorcade-fatigued DC residents. But Biden's not supposed to be traveling. He's supposed to be sound asleep in the residence, and a fleet of 5 Marine One helicopters over downtown DC just sticks out. Within an hour, the president's airborne. Accompanying him is an unusually small traveling party composed of 3 aides and advisors, a security detail, a medical team, and just 2 journalists. Not only is the press pool for the trip unusually small, with only the Wall Street Journal's Sabrina Siddiqui and the AP's Evan Vucci aboard, the reporting's also on delay as each handed over their cell phones upon arrival. While abnormal, there is some precedent here. For the sake of image and morale, presidents have often made trips to active war zones. Typically, these are kept under wraps. The planning of President Trump's 2019 trip to Afghanistan, for instance, was so quiet that when he left,
Trump went to Afghanistan. What the fuck? God damn, I would have thought maybe presidents wouldn't be going to those sort of situations because they want to be as protected as possible. But I guess they are still protected. But it's just that's kind of wild that they'll take them to these places. I didn't think that would be the case. But
left Mar-a-Lago, some of his Secret Service thought he was still on premise. On President Trump's trip too, only a precious few knew of his departure, press members forfeited phones, and plane windows were blacked out. Until Biden, though, no American president had visited an active conflict without an American troop presence or even a safe airbase to land at. Slipping into war-torn Ukraine without the presence of the planet's most powerful fighting force, without direct American air support, vehicles, or troops providing security, is an extreme risk, but a risk deemed by the president as worth it.
What? Wait, you went to Ukraine recently?
And a risk deemed by his security personnel best minimized by speed and secrecy rather than largesse and brute force. This cloak and dagger planning extended to what plane the president and traveling party flies, too. Normally, Air Force One, the call sign reserved for whatever's flying the president, is assigned to one of these easily distinguishable VC-25s. But because these are exclusively used by the president, they're anything but stealthy. In fact, it was a photo of an airborne VC-25 by a British plane spotter that tipped off Trump's secret trip to the Middle East.
In Sheffield, out of all places, some city in England just spotting this.
In 2019. Learning from this slip-up, Biden and team boarded a C-32 for its relative anonymity. Unlike the VC-25, if a C-32 is spotted, it could just as well be the First Lady, the Vice President, or a cabinet member. not necessarily the president, as these often carry a host of high-ranking officials. And it was spotted. Not long after the C-32 took off from Joint Base Andrews and pointed towards Ramstein Air Base, this tweet surfaced. Innocuous enough, using Flight Radar 24 and publicly available transponder data, the tweet had identified an irregularity, an oddity. And now, oddities were beginning to stack. After the trip to Poland was announced, press members had asked whether the president would be visiting Ukraine. Biden had, after all, visited Poland just 11 months earlier, and such a quick return seemed suspicious. And zeroing in further, the Twitter user who had spotted the C-32 initially had now dug deeper and posited that it very well could be President Biden aboard the flight. For their part, though, the president and company weren't waiting for the rest of the world to catch on. Having landed here at 8 p.m., a stealth motorcade whisked the president to Przemysl-Główny train station. While the Ukrainian train's interior lent it an air of stateliness fit for the office, these were not cars overhauled by Biden's team for Biden. It was simply a renovated luxury tourist train now repurposed to sneak world leaders in and out of the country.
What the hell?
Of all the high-risk maneuvers undertaken on this trip, it's likely that this is the most dangerous of all, as the idea of an unarmored train passing eastward, ever nearer to the front lines, left American intelligence navigating a minefield of uncontrollable variables.
That is wild.
In the weeks and months prior, this discomfort was made evident as White House planners pushed for safer, more predictable alternatives, like Biden and Zelensky meeting somewhere along the border or in the western city of Lviv, farther from active conflict and nearer to potential intervention. While the exact security detail and contingency planning is still unknown, we do know that the White House did communicate the trip to Russia ahead of time and that 3 separate American surveillance aircraft tightly looped overhead as the president crossed the border. Sunday is now Monday as the 10-hour, 400-mile, 650-kilometer journey comes to an end in Kyiv. After a briefing to refresh the president on the city's history, Biden steps aboard a modified white Toyota Land Cruiser. What was a secret is no more, as streets across the heart of Kyiv close to traffic and speculation hits fever pitch. Some 30 hours since his last sighting by the press, and after 24 hours of travel, the president pops up nearly 5,000 miles or 8,000 kilometers away from the White House. All for this. A public embrace of President Zelensky, a statement, a laying of a wreath at the Wall of Remembrance, and a quick stop at the US Embassy. Within 5 hours, he's already back on the train, heading towards the border, reading briefs, and preparing for tomorrow. Before even completing a trip that will be remembered in history books centuries on, it's already on to the next task. More motorcades, more meetings, and more handshakes. The executive branch understands the power of minor yet regular action. Each day in their daily briefing, the president learns a small amount about an ongoing issue, and as that sums up over the days, weeks, and months, they become one of the most informed people in the world on that subject. Our sponsor, Brilliant, uses this.
Well, damn. That was a bit of an insight into this sort of stuff. Imagine going into journalism school for 3 to 5 years just to end up writing articles about 2 people ordering the same dish at a restaurant. God, it's crazy. That's the thing, that this sort of stuff will get the most clicks. That's maybe not, but that's the scary thing. These sorts of stories are the ones that do well. I don't know, I've been seeing these US presidents do anything from playing Minecraft to going to medieval fairs. What? Do you reckon President's Game, like, just, you know, have a cheeky night, just, I don't know, ordering a pizza and just playing, I don't know, Hogwarts Legacy for the night? I'm sure they do, right? They have a bit of fun here and there, but yeah, this was a little look into the lives of a president, and it does seem very, I don't know, stressful maybe isn't the word, because I guess compared to another person, this is, for the money that you get, this isn't even comparable, but a lot of travel. I wouldn't like that. A lot of travel. Like, flying back and forth. I know it's easier for them. Like, it means they can get from place to place within minutes. Whereas for us, it will take hours because we've got to drive and all that stuff. But yeah, I guess it's not really a complaint, to be honest. Even though they're flying a lot, and I hate flying, it's all in the benefit for them to just travel and make the most of their time. But yeah, it was an interesting look. Hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. And if you want more reactions like this, let me know in the comments. And until next time, like, subscribe. Peace.